Hello there, all you beautiful people out there, and welcome to my channel. Let me chill before I get on with anything. And uh, please like and subscribe. Um, also, if you like what I do, please consider becoming a member of this channel. You can become a member for as low as 99 cents a month. You get debunks early and you also get custom emojis. So, also, I do have a Patreon that you can sign up for. Um, I have not done much on that, but I do have a Patreon. Also, you can PayPal me. Um, anyway, now that all the shilling's out of the way, let's get on with the um, good stuff. There's no coming of the week this week, so um, we're just going to get on with making fun of, excuse me, the fundy interpretation of the Bible. So let me share my screen. Here we go. Let me make sure you can see that. Okay. And today we're going through Esther 7 through 10. I do believe these are the last chapters of Esther. Can't quite remember. So, excuse me. Sorry about that. Um, all right. So let's get going. Chapter 7. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet, and as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted. Then Queen Esther answered, If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, Who is he? Where is he? The man who has dared to do such a thing. Esther said, An adversary and an enemy, this vile Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, A pole reaching to a height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had set it up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. The king said, Impale him on it. So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. Uh, yeah, if you don't know what impalement is, um, you might want to look up Vlad the Impaler. That's all I'm going to say about it. All right, chapter 8. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told him how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. "If it pleases the king," she said, "and if he regards me with favor and thinks it is the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, "Because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have impaled him on the pole he set up." I am not sure how true this story is. I know King Xerxes existed, but I'm not quite sure how true this story is. Um, like all good stories, it could mix history with mytho-history. So, there's that. Um, you might want to ask Dr. Josh of Digital Hammurabi. Now, verse 8. "Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring, for no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked." At once the royal secretaries were summoned on the 23rd day of the third month, the month of Sivan. They wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. That's interesting. I assume India is the same India as we have today, maybe a little bit bigger. Um, India has not always been confined to the subcontinent. Kush is in Africa. Uh, not quite sure where in Africa, but it's in Africa. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses, especially bred for the king. Verse 11. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them, and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers riding the royal horses went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. Verse 15. When Mordecai left the king's presence, he was wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe of fine linen. Okay, so just a little history lesson for you. The reason purple was a royal color in ancient times was that um, there were these sea creatures, which was the only way to get the color purple at that time. And these sea creatures, there had to be a lot of these sea creatures to get this purple dye for the royal robes. Um, and it was very, very time intensive. So that's why only royals could wear it. Of course, now we have synthetic purple, so not a problem anymore. Quick history lesson for you. And the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. Verse 16 For the Jews, it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor. In every province and in every city to which the edict of the king came, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. Sorry about that. Um, I have post-nasal drip. Okay, chapter 9. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but now the tables were turned, and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them. The Jews assembled in their cities and all provinces of King Xerxes to attack those who determined to destroy them. No one could stand against them because the people of all the other nationalities were afraid of them. And all the nobles of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the king's administrators helped the Jews because fear of Mordecai had seized them. Mordecai was prominent in the palace, his reputation spread throughout the provinces, and he became more and more powerful. Verse 5 The Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. They also killed Parshendatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Paratha, Adalia, Aridatha, Parmasha, Erisai, Eridai, and Vazetha. Apologies for any mispronunciation. Verse 10 The 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hamadath, the enemy of the Jews, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. Verse 11 The number of those killed in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king that same day. The king said to Queen Esther, The Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and the sons of Haman in the citadel of Susa. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? It will also be granted. If it pleases the king, Esther answered, give the Jews in Susa permission to carry out this day's edict tomorrow also, and let Haman's 10 sons be impaled on poles. Okay, well, if they shared their father's sentiments, yeah, I can understand that, but I didn't read anything in there where Haman's sons shared their father's sentiments, so why are they being punished? All right, moving on. Verse 14. So the king commanded this be done. An edict was issued in Susa, and they impaled the 10 sons of Haman. The Jews in Susa came together on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they put to death in Susa 300 men, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. Meanwhile, the remainder of the Jews who were in the king's provinces also assembled to protect themselves and get relief from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of them, but did not lay their hands on the plunder. I highly doubt that. Verse 17 This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. The Jews in Susa, however, had assembled on the 13th and 14th, and then on the 15th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. That is why rural Jews, those living in the villages, observed the 14th of the month of Adar as a joy of feasting and a day for giving presents to each other. Excuse me. Verse 20. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes near and far to have them celebrate annually the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar, as the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month when their sorrow was turned into joy and mourning into a day of celebration. He wrote them to observe the days as days of feasting and joy, giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor. So the Jews agreed to continue the celebration they had begun, doing what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast the pur, that is, the lot, for their ruin and destruction. But when the plot came to the king's attention, he issued written orders that the evil scheme Haman had designed against the Jews should come back onto his own head, and that he and his sons should be impaled on poles. Therefore, these days were called Purim, from the word pure, because of everything written in this letter and because of what they had seen and what happened to them. The Jews took it on themselves to establish the custom that they and their descendants and all who joined them should without fail observe these 2 days every year in the way prescribed and at the time appointed. These days should be remembered and observed in every generation by every family in every province and in every city. And these days of Purim should never fail to be celebrated by the Jews, nor should the memory of these days die out among their descendants. So Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm the second letter concerning Purim. Verse 30. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of Xerxes' kingdom, words of goodwill and assurance, to establish these days of Purim at their designated times, as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had decreed for them, and they established for themselves and their descendants in regard to their times of fasting and lamentation. Esther's decree confirmed these regulations about Purim, and it was written down in the records. Chapter 10. King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the empire to its distant shores, and all his acts of power and might, together with a full account of the greatness of Mordecai, whom the king had promoted, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Media and Persia? Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews and held in high esteem by his many fellow Jews because he worked for the good of his people and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. Yeah, and isn't it funny that we don't have the annals of the kings of the Medes and the Persians? And by funny, I mean weird, funny, not haha. So, anyway, that is it for Esther chapters 7 through 10. And I may be on later today. I don't know. I do have to go though. Um, you probably don't want to know why, but I do have to leave you for the moment. But like I said, I may be back on later on today. Hey, Limited, what's kind of funny that we don't have the annals of the kings of Media and Persia? I agree with you on that one. But you know what? I do have to say that the Library of Alexandria which housed a lot of the old records, did get burned down. So I'm not saying this for sure, but the annals could have been stored in um, the Library of Alexandria. Not quite sure why the annals of the kings of Media and Persia would be stored in Egypt, but that's always a reason. But, you know, I don't know. We don't have those records anymore. Um, but at any rate, that is a viable option. Not saying it's it is what happened, but there are a lot of old records that, we just don't have anymore. So, yeah, could have been in the Library of Alexandria, which got burned down, and I can't remember when it got burned down. Um, but yeah, uh, but that helped. But whether or not the annals of the kings of Media and Persia were in the Library of Alexandria that got burnt down, there were a lot of treasures that got lost when the Library of Alexandria was burnt down. And this is why we have to fight against um, stuff like that, you know, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the burning of the Library of Alexandria was an accident. I think it was on purpose. So anyway, yeah. Um, anyway, I do have to go. Thanks for coming, Limited. And again, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you can, become a member. You can become a member for as low as 99 cents a month. You get debunks early and custom emojis. And I will see you later. Goodbye.